Hello and welcome to the podcast that is less interested in intricate set-piece routines and more interested in chucking it into the mixer and hoping for a fortunate flick on. It's the big man up top.
It's the big man up top. Hello, Joe. How are you?
Yes, I'm very well. Ed, are you okay?
Oh, I'm great, thank you. We are remote again because you are still having car trouble.
Still having car trouble. Hopeful that this is the week where it gets sorted.
Where it gets fixed. Good. And we'll be back in the studio next week is the plan.
But my car very much still only has 3 wheels.
Oh, dear.
But speaking of wheels falling off, can we talk about Man United yet?
I was expecting, a joyous Joe this week, and you have not disappointed.
No, well, it's always a glorious time. It's one of those games that, as a Liverpool fan, I can't stand watching it. I really struggle. I have to watch it on my own. I can't be with any friends. And it just turned out it was a glorious afternoon.
For those of you who are just tuning in to the Big Man Up Top for the first time, Joe is a Liverpool supporter, as you can probably guess. And interestingly, we haven't released this information before, but producer Anthony is unfortunately a Man United fan, so he is not happy. We're expecting this to get cut out of the final edit.
Very much so.
I thought Liverpool looked really good. It was a bit of a classic bit of both thing. I thought Liverpool were very good, but Man United were also very terrible, weren't they? And completely lost the midfield battle.
What else has gone on this weekend? I suppose we should talk about Everton, shouldn't we?
We should. I mean, I can't remember a team being in such a commanding position in a game so late on and collapsing like they did. What was it, 87, 88 minutes or something?
Yeah, 87 minutes. And the thing is, they played so well up until then. It's their best performance of probably the last few years, I would say.
And they looked really good, and Calvert-Lewin, he was doing his job, and the midfield had creativity, and they looked solid, and the fans were behind them, and then it just all went wrong.
It all went wrong, and Sean Dyche said himself that he could smell it in the air, that a comeback was coming. I don't quite know what that smells like.
Something not nice, not nice. I'm going to go with
one of those. Maybe it's one of those smells that's like, what is that? What is that?
It's an ominous smell.
An ominous, vague smell, and it turned into a 3-2 win for Bournemouth. It's one of those that you saw the first goal come in, and you're like, oh, the comeback's on, and then they equalise, and you're confident they're going to go on and win it, and they could have even won this 4-2.
So in the Manchester City game, Haaland, again, I feel like we shouldn't dwell on this for too long. Another hat-trick. We're beginning to... I say we're beginning. We've already run out of superlatives. We are already making up adjectives to describe him, yada, yada, yada. Are we just going to assume that City have won the title already?
I think it looks pretty inevitable, doesn't it? That's a word that often comes to mind at this point. Inevitable.
Particularly enjoyed Southampton. Playing it out from the back, and it just not going well at all. Obviously we're big fans of the big man up top. Just launch it forward on this podcast. But
launch it forward. Yeah.
You got to admire them for trying their tactic that served them so well in the Championship. But it's that thing of, well, is this just going to go wrong at some point?
You do have to admire it, but at the same time, you do have to adapt. When you get promoted to the Premier League, it is a step up, and I think Burnley tried this last year with playing it out from the back, playing attractive football that worked for them in the Championship, and it didn't go well. But I think you look at clubs like Brentford and Brighton, Fulham, who, when they came up, they adapted their game, and you would describe them now as mainstays in the Premier League because of the way they've adapted to the league and their style of play. So it'll be interesting to see where Southampton get to this season.
I was particularly enamoured watching Match of the Day at the weekend by the coverage of the Aston Villa set-piece coach, Austin McPhee. I've never heard of this guy before, and obviously he only came onto the screen after a clever set-piece routine paid off for Villa. There was a comment about, well, he's earned his money now. which I thought was remarkable after one clever goal that he's earned whatever ridiculous salary he's on.
Is he paid per set-piece goal? That's my question.
Well, this is it. And it got me thinking, set-piece coaches, I've got to be honest, Joe, I'm very sceptical.
Well, you're a Stoke fan. You don't believe in planning set-pieces. You just launch it in and see what happens.
Just get it right close to the goalkeeper, put him under pressure.
Get it close to Ricardo Fuller.
Exactly, just get a nudge off the back of somebody's head. Now, Liverpool used to have a set-piece coach, very specifically a throw-in coach.
Yeah, he was employed quite early on in the Klopp era, and I remember it happening, and we were all like, "Oh, why? Like, what is this going to do?"
What's the point in that? Yeah,
you could argue it's been very successful. I don't know if you pay attention to the way they throw it in.
I don't.
No. I don't think it's a noticeable difference. But the thing with set-piece coaches, I have to admit, I'm very familiar with Austin McPhee and his work. I'm a bit low-key obsessed with him. I think he's quite a distinctive-looking man.
Yes.
He's got long blonde hair. He's got a beard. He looks quite Viking-like, doesn't he?
Viking or Chad Kroger, any of those comparisons.
But he's also the set-piece coach of Scotland.
Right.
So he just loves John McGinn, clearly.
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't? But I'm a bit of a... I don't know if you play Football Manager, Ed.
I used to in my teenage years.
I still do, very much in my late 20s. I still do.
I have children, Joe. I have children. I don't have time for Football Manager.
So true. But I often sign Austin McPhee as my set-piece coach. I think every team has one now. And you're right, the camera will often pan to them when they score a set-piece goal or one nearly goes in. Often you'll see them take the place of the manager in the technical area when there's a set-piece. The set-piece coach will be all over it. He'll be like, back off, this is my area.
This whole thing, maybe I'm a football purist, Joe, I don't know, maybe it's my inner Sam Allardyce coming out, but it all feels very American to me. Now, I'm a big fan of the NFL,
Famously.
But obviously they have entire offensive teams with offensive coaches and defensive teams with defensive coaches, but also special teams, for field goals and for kickoffs and stuff. They have entire routines and coaches just dedicated to those set pieces. And I don't know, I love a lot of things about American football. I'm not convinced that set-piece coaches is one thing that's going to improve our game. It's a flowing, it's a flowing game from end to end, and all the players need to be able to do all of the stuff. We've got to the time in the show, Joe, where we are going to do our Bible Ballers trivia. Bible Ballers is the terrible name we've given it. We are
the
open.
Working title.
We are open to suggestions. Please email us podcasts@ucb.co.uk. But so how this works is it's guess the player with a difference. So I'm going to quiz Joe this week, give him some clues to see if he can guess the name of a player. But the difference is that the first name of this player will be the name of a book in the Bible. So how are you feeling? Are you confident today, Joe?
Yeah, fairly confident. I've got my Bible ready.
This one I think is a hard one, Joe.
Oh, okay.
Okay, are you ready for this?
Yeah, go on.
Which former midfielder started his career at Manchester United, transferred to a championship club where he stayed for 5 seasons, won the Premier League, and then ended his career at Chelsea in a move that was once called the second worst transfer in Premier League history?
Okay.
So what are your initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts, former midfielder, so that means he doesn't play anymore.
That's
or
correct.
Or is he now a striker that was a midfielder?
No, he is a former footballer, so he's
former
retired.
Footballer. He has retired, finished at Chelsea. I mean, my immediate thought is Danny Drinkwater, because he had quite an unsuccessful transfer to Chelsea off the back of winning the Premier League with Leicester. He feels like someone that would have started at Manchester United. That's where my head's at right now, Ed.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you the rest of the episode to think about it, Joe, and we'll come back to this at the end.
So Ed, this is our 4th episode.
I know, 4 episodes in. We've been doing this for a month now, Joe.
A month now. How do you feel it's going so far?
Yeah, good. I mean, as I read in one tweet the other day, early days, but, good start.
Early days, very much so. We have been getting some feedback, some quite good feedback, I would say. It's been an encouraging few weeks. And this is something we want to talk about now. Not so much encouragement, but we might have also got a bit of criticism, Ed.
Yeah, you never know.
You never know. There's probably people out there criticising what we're doing. But criticism is something that we all experience as football fans. You might criticise your players. You might criticise the refs and the officials of the game. And we want to have a little chat now about how do we approach this as people with a faith. We're both Christians. We're both big football fans. And it's so easy to slip into criticising people in the game and in general life, isn't it? So, Ed, you sat down with Larry Henry to talk about this, didn't you?
Yes, I did, yeah. He's a football writer based in America. So he writes on Major League Soccer and also the US men's national team. I thought it'd be really interesting to sort of get some insight from a journalist about how do they, give feedback, I suppose. They've got to evaluate performances and that sort of thing and then write about it. So I thought it would be really great to get some insight into how he views criticism.
Let's do it.
Larry Henry, thank you so much for joining us on The Big Man Up Top.
Oh, no problem at all. Thanks for the invite.
Obviously, you're not from the UK, but you're a bit of a football fan, aren't you? For the purposes of this interview, I will let you refer to it as soccer because, usually we have a pretty hard, fast rule, but I'll make an exception for you, sir.
Yeah, so obviously been a big fan for a long time now. My first memories probably in the U.S. was seeing the Philadelphia Union in the Major League Soccer, being able to see some of the European clubs come over for their preseason tour. And it really just kicked off since then. I was following the Premier League, following the Championship, had some friends that played the sport, so kind of picking their brain to learn about the players that I might not have known in years past. So I think I've done a pretty good job of getting up to speed on the who's who in the sport of football/soccer.
Yeah, so you know your stuff. So you're currently the managing editor at SBI Soccer. So tell us a little bit about what you do there.
So day to day, we're really reporting on the American players and the U.S. men's and women's national teams. A lot of the American players that play overseas now. Obviously, that list continues to grow more and more, and it's been really fun. It's really cool to interview some players, coaches, being able to watch a lot of these great stories in leagues with promotion, relegation, and just see the interest level kind of grow here in the U.S. with the leagues overseas. Obviously, I think we've had a lot of Premier League interest and Bundesliga and a lot of top European leagues. So I think that's just going to continue to grow as years come. And obviously, with the World Cup right on the corner, I think it's going to be great for the country.
I feel like this is a bit of a low-hanging fruit comment, so I feel like we'll get it out of the way early doors, but welcome to Wrexham. How much of a big thing has that been? Because I feel like every American I know a lot of Americans, they've always sort of been not particularly interested in football, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, but I've seen Welcome to Wrexham, or the other one is Ted Lasso. How much of a big sort of influence of those two programs had on the popularity of football over in the US?
I think they've definitely risen over the last couple of years. I think Wrexham has been a really cool story to watch. A lot of the local areas where I live have fan groups now. I was able to go to one of their friendlies last season when they played Philadelphia Union 2, and it was a packed atmosphere, packed house, and it was really a cool opportunity for these young kids in the Philadelphia Union Academy to play against professional players in the Wrexham squad. So obviously that continued this year with some more of their friendlies in the U.S. I think that's just going to continue to grow with the success of the club being able to get promoted 2 years in a row is a pretty awesome feat. And obviously, the ownership, I think, has a little part to play in that. But I think that it's a good testament to the club to build off that momentum and continue to have high aspirations to get into the Premier League. As for Ted Lasso, I think it's definitely kind of same with Wrexham. You see a little influences here and there with the show. It was definitely a fun watch. My wife and I watched it, and it was pretty cool. Was trying to teach her a little bit about the clubs that were mentioned in the show. It was definitely a big hit, and I could see even more shows like that happening down the road.
Yeah, my wife and I were both big fans as well. So, yeah, we loved Ted Lasso. But the main reason I wanted to speak to you today is that we're talking about the idea of being critical about players. Now, I don't know if it's the same over in the US, but over here, the football media sort of gets accused of being overly critical, particularly about footballers and managers. And I'd just be really interested to sort of hear your take as a journalist and whether you think there's any truth to that claim.
I definitely think there's a truth to it. No matter if it's football or any other sport, we see it in the U.S. as well. A guy drops a winning touchdown pass in the NFL, and he's getting ripped in the media. A guy misses a wide open shot in basketball that could win the game. You read articles about, this player shouldn't be on the team anymore. Maybe he needs to get cut from the team. I do think that there is some truth to it where the media does go a little overboard. It's something that I've always tried to steer clear from in terms of my writing. I kind of trying to keep it on the field and performances. I think that with maybe some education, with some, taking a step back and looking from it from afar, I think that could definitely help.
And how do you sort of balance your sort of responsibility as a journalist? Your job is to tell a story, right? And if a player's performing badly, they're performing badly, and that's something you've got to talk about. How do you balance that with not being overly critical?
It's definitely tough because, like, for an example, like I'll even look at the U.S. men's national team and kind of the poor performance they've had at the Copa America. Obviously, I'm from the country and I want to see the team do well. So there's a little bit of, I really wish the team would line up like this, but I have to try to keep that fandom to the side and just keep it focused on writing and looking at the team and how they can maybe build off these poor performances and how they can turn things around. But I never have really gone over the edge in terms of calling a player out. It's for, hey, maybe this player can improve for the next year to come, and this is how I think they could improve, or maybe the coach could make this change for the future. So, yeah, I think it's about just taking a breath, looking at it from afar, and knowing that someone somewhere is going to read your writing, look at your stuff, and maybe use that as a reference for something with the team.
And I know we've spoken previously about how your faith is an important part of your life. The Bible tells us that we are to tell the truth, but equally it also tells us that we are to be building people up as well. And that's sort of always that tension there. Do you find that sort of as a person of faith that has an impact with like the way you write about other people?
I think it does for sure. Somebody somewhere is going to be maybe affected by your writing in terms of they might be a relative of a player that you wrote about or a sibling of a coach that you might have maybe scrutinized a little bit about for some decisions they made or maybe decisions they didn't make in a game. So I always look at it as that there's going to be fans maybe reading my writing or looking at my work or sharing it with a friend or family member, but there's always going to be somebody that you might not know or see share the article that could have a big impact on how it's perceived.
And I think it's that thing of sort of, realizing and remembering that there's a human being behind the superstar, as it were, maybe.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, I think we're people first. Obviously, we have friends, we have families, we have loved ones in our lives. And I think we have to look at everyone like that first because, when their career is done, they're going to be with those loved ones and starting the next chapter of their lives.
Yeah, definitely. And I think even just us on this podcast, Larry, we are the football media in a very, very, very tedious way, the sort of the nonsense that we chat about on this show. But, equally, we're talking about what's happened that weekend in the Premier League. Somebody could go on Twitter and tell the world exactly what they think of my performance, and that's kind of scary. Equally, yourself, you're a writer, somebody in that sort of public space, I suppose. So people could be writing about what they think of you, and you just have to, I guess, try and put yourself in somebody else's shoes. How would I like it if somebody was critiquing my work very publicly?
Yeah, I think there's been instances where I've gotten great feedback from people on a certain story or a certain topic, but I've also gotten some maybe negative responses for an article or an opinion. You just have to kind of put it to the side and just focus on how you can do your work successfully in terms of building people up and building up the subjects that you write about.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us, Larry. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Take care, guys.
So that was Ed sitting down with Larry Henry, American journalist, talking about criticism and how we approach that as Christians. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head towards the end there, Ed, about humanizing these people. These are actual people, aren't they? And I think this is something that we're trying to do through this podcast, is talk about that human aspect of being a footballer.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's not just football. I think it's in all sorts of walks of life. Politics is another example, is that everybody's got their opinions. I've got mine, you've got yours, and it's very tempting to just spout those opinions, and it's not to say anything about whether they're valid or not, but at the end of the day there's a bit of a disconnect, isn't there, between the people that we see on TV and us in our living room, or on the other end of our phone or whatever it may be. And it's just very tempting to just sort of say what you think with no filter. And actually, would you speak like that to that person face to face? I'm not sure you would. If you look at that from a football perspective, that same distance is there. The fans are in the stands, or even watching on telly, and if a player's not playing well, you feel like you want to let them know. and actually, if that player was in front of you, would you say those things to that player in that way? We've actually seen this quite starkly this week with the it was last week, Everton away at Tottenham, when they lost quite heavily, and there was a lot of footage on social media of Everton fans telling the players at Euston Station exactly what they thought. We'll put it like that. And they were quite sort of ugly scenes.
Well, I think you're right. I think everyone feels entitled to an opinion, and that is true. Like, we all have them. We all think we know better than a lot of people, and I think you're right about the whole distance thing. When you're in a stadium full of people, it's so easy just to join in with what's being said. You're a few hundred meters away from, I don't know, is it a few hundred meters? That feels quite far.
You're some distance.
You're some distance away from these players, and it's easy for you to do it. You often see videos of like non-league football where you're a lot closer to the players. And I think I saw a video earlier on this season of a fan hurling abuse at a player during non-league, and the player almost like retaliating and giving him some back, and suddenly we get so offended. If they say it back, we're like, oh, how dare they say this? Like, that's so unprofessional. So I think there's a lot of double standards at play here.
Definitely. But you had this at the weekend with Ten Hag at United, taking Garnacho off, and the fans were obviously not happy. He was a player who was playing well, and I think they probably would have preferred to have seen someone like Rashford come off instead. And they've responded by booing quite clearly the manager's decision there. So I had a question for you, Joe. Have you ever booed at a football match? Are you a booer?
I'm not a seasoned booer. It's not in my personality, but I've joined in with the odd boo. Mm-hmm. I distinctly remember my dad taking me to Anfield. I'm not sure what year this would have been. Maybe the late noughties. It was Liverpool against Newcastle, and my dad is also very much not a booer.
Yeah, it's not in his locker.
It's not. It's not. But Joey Barton did this absolutely horrendous tackle on Xabi Alonso in the corner towards the end of the game. I think they were 3-0 up. And my dad booed Joey Barton with the rest of the state. And I looked over at him and said, oh, even Dad's... It must be bad. Even Dad is booing. But he felt bad afterwards. He was like, oh, I shouldn't have booed. And I'm like, I don't think Joey would have heard you.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, and there's booing opposition players when they are, doing something like that for a bad foul or for a dive. There's all sorts of different reasons a fan might boo, and I think we're not here to sort of dissect that on this episode, but I think it does sort of raise the issue of how we get messages across.
Yeah.
And I think particularly, as Christians, we look to the Bible to help guide our decisions and our behaviours and things like that. There's a verse in Psalm 119 that says, "The entirety of your word is truth, and every one of your righteous judgments endures forever." So that first part, the entirety of your word is truth, and that's speaking about God, and saying every word that God speaks is truth, and so we should be trying to emulate the same thing. Obviously, there's one of the famous commandments, is about not lying. So I think there's that thing of how important truth is to God and how important truth should be to us as Christians. And you know what? Sometimes players have terrible games. They do, and that is objectively against all the metrics that we've got. That's the truth. But then if you compare that with Ephesians 4 verse 29, it says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up." So that's a verse which is reminding us of our responsibility, that the words that come out of our mouth are really important, and we should be using them to build others up, to encourage people. And so there's a thing of how do you hold that in tension. And so I just think maybe as fans we need to be learning how to remind ourselves that footballers, managers, officials, they are humans too, doing the job to the best of their ability.
Exactly. I think when it comes to criticism, we need to ask the question, what are we saying this for? Are we saying this to get our point across? Are we saying this for us because we will feel better after we've done it so they know how we feel? Or are we saying it for them to build them up and to encourage them? And there's ways of doing that. Like, you're not just going to criticize someone and say, you didn't do that very well, without then saying constructively, how could you...
And just remembering that also as well, in the heat of the moment, it's very, very easy to lose our heads and lose our cool. So I think when I'm in the crowd and I can feel the tension rising, I think it's always good to just take a moment, have a breath, remind yourself that they are God's children too. I'm sure
that works really well in the Britannia Stadium.
Even if they have just scythed down our left winger with an atrocious tackle from behind.
Guys, everyone count to 10. You're all God's creation.
We're all God's creation.
That's going to work really well.
Yeah, we'll see, shall we? We'll see. We'll keep an eye on our booing at the next games that we go to.
Think before you boo.
Think before you boo. Well, we're going to come back to our trivia item now, Joe. So I'm going to read the question again. So, which former midfielder started his career at Manchester United, transferred to a championship club where he stayed for 5 seasons, won the Premier League, and then ended his career at Chelsea in a move that was once called the second worst transfer in Premier League history? That was ESPN, by the way.
Was it?
Yeah.
Do you know who number 1 was?
I do. I'll come to that in a minute. But yeah, talk us through your thinking.
Well, earlier I mentioned Danny Drinkwater.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to stick with him because I think he feels like someone who started his career at Man United. I have no evidence for that whatsoever. It just feels right.
He feels very Man United.
It then wouldn't have worked out. He moves to Leicester, who in the time were in the Championship. He's there for 5 seasons. His 5th season, he wins the Premier League with Leicester, famously. Then moves to Chelsea because they'll buy anyone who's had a good season.
Yeah.
He then did go to Aston Villa, but I'm wondering if his moves that followed were loan moves and he's moved back to Chelsea and retired there. That's what I'm going... And I think and this is just to get me a bonus point if I'm wrong.
There's no bonus points, but go on.
But he is training to be a builder, I think.
Okay.
To set himself up for retirement. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the correct answer is Danny Drinkwater.
Oh, I'm delighted with that.
Well
I'm not going to lie.
Well done, yes. So Danny Drinkwater, he started his career at Manchester United. No appearances for them. He got on the bench for a dead rubber league match against Hull in 2009. While he was at United, he had loan moves to Huddersfield, Cardiff, Watford, Barnsley, before securing a permanent move to Leicester, nearly 200 appearances for them. Then moved to Chelsea, and he then had loan moves while he was at Chelsea to Burnley, Aston Villa, a team in Turkey, and Reading. The worst transfer, according to ESPN, was Ali Dia's move to Southampton.
Oh, famously. Was he found on the street or something?
Something like that, wasn't it? Graham Souness, and it was he was a cousin of George Weah or something. and yeah, they got him on the pitch, and after 5 minutes realised that he could not play football.
No.
But anyway, so yes, Danny Drinkwater.
Oh, well, I'm delighted with that. And I will have my bonus point because I found quickly Googled an article here. From football fame to construction.
Right.
Danny Drinkwater's bold new move.
Okay. Well, if there were bonus points on offer, I would give you one, but there isn't, sadly. Okay. So you're just going to have to take the one. That means you're 2-0 up, though, Joe.
2-0 up. And there's a real move at the moment of Premier League setting themselves up for retirement. You know, we spoke a couple of weeks ago about Matt Ritchie training as a lorry driver.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
There's just a full circle moment, Ed. They're just normal men.
They're just normal men, exactly.
So that is all we have time for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Big Man Up Top. If you want to get in touch with the show, ping us an email to podcasts@ucb.co.uk. Please follow, subscribe, and give us your 5-star reviews, because that will really help us out in the early days to get the word out. And if you've enjoyed this, please tell your mates as well. A huge thank you to our producer, Anthony, for all his hard work behind the scenes. And there will be a new episode next Tuesday, Ed.
Yes, and we'll be in the studio again next time.
All going well with the car.
All going well, yes.
It will.
See you later, Joe.
See you, mate.
Bye-bye.